Hi there, Hazel Wagner, and welcome to Ordinary Visionaries. So
Thank
great to have
you.
you here.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Robert.
So, the first question I ask everyone on Ordinary Visionaries is, how are you an ordinary visionary?
Well, first of all, I would like to mention that I feel like ordinary visionary is an oxymoron. And maybe that's what makes the topic so interesting or makes it interesting to think about how to answer it. So
Yeah,
I have put some thought into it, as you probably will be able to tell. First of all, I wanted to think about what's ordinary. Well, I've lived my life like most people have, married, 3 children, went to school. Now, there's a piece that's not so ordinary. I'll talk about that in a second. Worked my whole life. I think my first job was at 14 years old. My parents had to sign off, and the school had to sign off to let me work on the
wow.
weekends or after school. So I've worked my whole life.
What
And
what motivated you to want to work so young? I definitely didn't have that motivation.
It's hard to remember that far back, but um, it meant I had some of my own money,
Yep.
and I thought it would be fun, and I wanted to do it, and I wanted to have some of my own money. And my jobs as, a 14, 15, 16-year old, I worked every summer. I worked on the weekends very often. I worked in what was called a five and dime store.
Sure.
I was a
Sure.
waitress at a food counter for a while. I was a cashier, and then I was a cashier at a shoe store. I did all these little jobs that teenagers very often do, and that's what I was. I was a teenager and trying to earn some of my own money that I could decide how to spend, let's say. I don't
Yeah.
really know.
Well,
What was
just your first job is often a reflection of being an ordinary visionary because you had an idea. I want to be independent. I want this, and that's a vision. Vision
Mhm.
doesn't have to be, rule the friggin' world. And then you took action. And, and if you get a job early in your career, in your life, it really sets you up for success because
Yeah.
you know basically how to handle things and do a job and be responsible. So,
And appreciate what works well and what doesn't.
yeah.
Um, I still remember thinking to myself, if I ever earned $100 a week, I'd be in heaven. Um,
In
but
Clover.
oh golly, so you realize how different how money has changed in terms of how much has value for you and how much doesn't. And then I worked this food counter, this lunch counter over Christmas break from school, and somebody gave me a really big tip. I don't remember how much it was, but it felt really big because it was Christmas time. And I appreciated all these years about how tipping can really make somebody's day and can be important. So it is things that you do learn some things way in the beginning of your life, you might say. And I
Yeah.
will tell you, my children also had jobs when they were young. It was just an assumed thing that people would, and you mentioned before we got actually online about candy stripers. I had a daughter who did that. Um,
Yeah.
my my children, jumped into doing various jobs and learned something about the value of money, the value of hard work, understanding what it means to work for someone else and follow their instructions and so on. So yes, I think it's kind of ordinary. I raised 3 children. Um, they, I, I wanted to go to school. I felt that degrees would make a difference. And maybe I took them to the umpteenth degree. I have 4 degrees, a PhD
What are
in,
your degrees in?
okay, well, bachelor's, master's, and PhD in mathematics. And then I
Wow.
went back to school again after the PhD and got an MBA in international marketing and finance. So I
Wow.
just and I want you to know that even after I got my fourth degree, I've never stopped having this need to learn all the time.
Right.
I sign up for things, even podcasts sometimes. I sign up for things. I read books. I ask people questions. I want to learn all the time. I never want to stop learning. And I think that's what keeps people vibrant and interesting. Um, and then there's the other side of it that's so important to me. I want to share what I've learned, the wisdom, the understanding, the subjects, the recognition, whatever it is over the years. What good is it if all I do, see, this is my brain up here that I'm showing you my
What does
brain.
it say on I can't read it.
It says on here, brainstormingthatworks.com.
Ah,
It's one of my websites, and I do a lot of stuff with brainstorming. I can take it off so it doesn't confuse people. But I chose math because I was good at it, I think, at the time. But I'm also very logical and thoughtful about things. And I'd like to use that. Let's talk about how that led into what I think is the visionary part of the question that
yeah.
you're asking.
But just that drive to get all that education, you were moving towards something, wanting to learn. So that makes you extraordinary. I mean, some people don't read at all. They're not interested in ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying they're bad people, but they're not visionaries for the most part.
Yeah, and people pick up ideas in many different ways. I like to read books online. I have the digital books, hundreds actually, and sometimes I even get physical books.
Yep.
And I read all the time. And I'm the kind who uses a yellow highlighter, and you can do that in digital books as well as real
I
books.
know. I use Kindle. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm always marking things I want to go back and look at once more, or a quote I think I'd like to share with somebody else. I do cut and paste very often where I want to send a paragraph I just read to somebody else. So there was all this wanting to learn, but there's all this wanting to share it with others and not just keep it locked inside me, but to share as much as I can and encourage other people in ways. So
I can relate. Totally. I got a question for you.
okay.
And this is a bit about me, but in the early part of my career, I read a lot. I read 500 books in 10 years, but everything about marketing. And after a certain point, it was like I felt FUFTB, full up fit to burst. And then I really slowed down my reading. So, there's a lot of other distractions. There's the internet. Now there's streaming. You can get any damn movie you want. So are you still read more than all those other things, like watching movies, TV?
I think I do all of it at various times, but I read. There's a book sitting right there on the coffee table that I'm reading now.
Right.
Sam Horn has written such wonderful books. And her newest one is Talking on Eggshells. And that's what I'm reading right now in case anybody's interested. But I'm always seeking new information. And I do find that sometimes you can get burned out from reading about the same subject over and over. It starts to feel repetitive. I have no idea how many books I read. I'm impressed that you read 500 books in that time.
Yeah, I figured it out more or less,
Right.
And
I don't
I
really
got
have
rid of
any.
a lot of them because they ran out of space. But yeah. So,
Okay.
so we have a lot of time to talk about everything, but I'm curious if you had turning point books. I had some turning point books, and I won't get into those for myself, but I read that book and it changed my life. Changed the whole trajectory of my life. A few books. And were there any like that for you?
Nothing pops into my head that way. But there was something that I did that happened to do this change in trajectory, I would say to you. And it follows with what I had been talking about so far. So when I was working on my research for my PhD, you have to do original research, by the way, and you have to publish something that covers some topic or research or results that no one else did before. It has to be original.
Wow.
And my subject was mathematics. Now think about, if you had to do a dissertation on mathematics, what is there that would be new and different that you could do research and write about? Well,
You don't like challenges at all, do you?
Right. So
Wow.
one of the things that had bothered me for years was why some people are good in math and some people really struggle. And the reason it was so apparent to me is the way I put myself through college. One of the things that happened is that I wanted to know why some people were really struggling. And when people were struggling, there were I tutored, first of all. That's how I got myself through school. I tutored math. So I really knew what people were complaining about or having difficulty with.
Yeah.
And one of the subjects that bothered people a lot, and you really need to know in life, has to do with fractions, decimals, percentages. We use those things all the time. That is a mathematical subject. I'll admit that. It's a mathematical subject. But the thing is that people really struggle with that. So I decided to do research on it. And I did a study where I was testing. I put together an instrument. That's the fancy name for a little sort of a test.
Yeah.
And I gave that test to people from third grade through adults not in school anymore, college graduates, college students, whatever, and all over the country, city,
Really?
suburban, rural. I made sure that I had a big range of things. And I came to a very interesting conclusion that I was able to publish. And that is that the people who do well in mathematics visualize, and this is not just about being a visionary, but visualize a picture in their head, a diagram, something that helps them understand what the mathematical concept is that they're trying to do. What does addition, take a simple one, what does addition mean? Well, if they could picture in their head, okay, I have 2 blocks and 3 blocks, and I'm putting them together, and now I have 5 blocks, obviously a very young kind of idea. They understood 2 plus 3 equals 5 a lot better than someone who just saw squiggles of a number, 2 plus 3, on a piece of paper. Now, that's an oversimplification, perhaps, but it is the truth. And so young children who visualized the mathematics that they were trying to learn and understand, and people in college and in business, if they had a visual picture of what they were trying to understand mathematically, they got it. And if they never did that, if they only saw it as some numbers written on a piece of paper, they were the ones who struggled. And I published it, and lots of people have used my research, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And it
Can
led.
you teach somebody that?
Pardon
To
me?
think that way about math? Can you teach someone to use imagery?
Yes.
Because I'm just thinking of what I do, because I struggle with math.
Mm-hmm.
I won't get into how much, but I just and when you're self-employed, you have to know basic math and the profit and loss, and none of that is very complicated, to say the least.
Right.
But that's a very interesting thing, It like adding different kinds of fractions. What's 1/3 plus 1/4? Just
Well, as long as you
I have a
ask
little
for that
calculator by my
third
desk.
plus 1/4, you have to take something that you have in thirds and something that you have in quarters and break them into smaller pieces so that you have the same kind of pieces. And then you can add them together.
Yeah, into
So,
twelfths,
yes, right.
3/12 and
And
whatever.
it's taught in school as a mechanical thing that kids do instead of actually taking items and breaking them up and understanding why you need to do that.
Right.
So it led me, I ended up leaving education, you might say. Eventually, I had some jobs in education after my PhD, and I was working on my MBA, and I decided to go into business, and I went into sales and found out I love sales, and I love computers, and I love everything technical. And
Yeah.
I went into the field of selling computer services and computers, and did those sorts of things for a number of years. And I loved to do that.
Hey,
But
so
one of
was there
the
some
things,
correspondence between math and selling?
you think there might be?
Well, I don't know. I wondered if you discovered something there. I mean, that's interesting. It's like you really, like I always liked art.
Mhm.
That was my favorite class, art. And so it's really great now because, well, I have an eye for design, and I was never taught design, but I have a
Mhm.
good eye for design. And, so there's there is a lot of math in selling, like the percentages and how many people do you have to talk to close a deal, and that you can really use math in those ways. So I don't know what it was for
Well,
you.
that's an interesting idea, and I don't know. I didn't think about it. Maybe that was happening for me. But I would say to you, I was much more interested in how people thought about things, how they made decisions, how they developed a strategy and tactics around what they were doing in business. After all, I was selling. Well, I was selling to universities and hospitals and businesses.
Wow.
And you have to understand then how they make decisions and help them make the decision for what you're suggesting to them as a salesperson. And the thinking styles, the way people thought about things, the way people um, did their critical thinking, their problem solving, their figuring out which way to go and how do I look at my alternatives, my options, and what should I pick, and so on. Again, went back to how do people think? How do they make decisions? How do they come up with ideas and decide which way to go forward? And option thinking, being able to think about what your possibilities are, to me was a very important part of sales, because when you talk to people and you only tried to sell them on what you had to offer, that
It
wasn't
doesn't
very
work.
helpful to them. But if you talk to them about what are your options and what will happen if you go in this direction and what would happen if you go in that direction and what other possibilities are there and so on, then they appreciate it and very often end up deciding they'd go with the person and the company who was willing to look at other options than just what they were offering.
Yeah, and then your attention and interest is on them and helping them solve a problem.
Right.
Yeah, well, to to get that clarity so early in your career was pretty powerful.
It was.
I always said that the people who could learn how to sell, marketing would never be a problem. Getting clients would never be a problem. But if you were bad at selling or had it backwards, and I have to convince someone, they ended up hating selling. So you're a rare person that can, and you sort of taught yourself that, it sounds like.
Well, I certainly walked into sales with having no sales experience, no sales training. Um, and I went into computer sales, and I remember so much in the first week or two, they did put me into some training, which was more technical training about what I was going to be selling. And and this company, actually, this was the second company I went to work for. They insisted that salespeople could build a computer if you had to. So you had to take the parts and put them together. You had to know all the part numbers and what needed to be put together. And I remember saying to myself, I'll never be able to learn this. This is so complicated. How am I ever going to be able to do this? And I remember at about 11, 12 months later, I was doing something for an opportunity that I was working on. And I suddenly said, oh my goodness, I'm doing this. I'm working with all these part numbers and putting them all together, and they work. Surprised myself.
That built your confidence, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's amazing how after a while you just start to catch on to something if you do it a lot, just
Right.
falls into place.
Right. Well,
some people just give up though, I'm not that kind of person.
You asked me a little earlier if there was a book that changed me.
Yeah.
That was really important. And I would say that there are many of them, but you just reminded me of one that has been very important later. Mindset. The idea of being able to understand that a person can have a fixed mindset or can have a growth mindset. And all right, now I have to remember the name of the author.
Sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't think I've read it.
Oh, it's a fantastic, fantastic book, and I'll get you the name before we leave today. It's just.
I'm going to write it down right now.
Yes, for some reason.
Don't worry about it.
All right, Dweek, I think the last name is. I'll get it in a minute. But she did this research with children and noticed the difference between children doing jigsaw puzzles and giving them more and more pieces. And some would say, that's too much for me. I can't do that. And they gave up without even trying. And there were others who would keep trying and say, oh, this is going to be a difficult, but I like difficult. I like doing this. And so right. This was something, this whole idea of fixed mindset versus growth mindset is such an important thing in our lives. How do we approach something? Do we give up on something because it is too hard? We think it's too hard. We haven't even tried it, so we don't even know if it's too hard, but we give up. Or do we say to ourselves, this may be difficult, but I'm going to see what I can do. Maybe I'll do some research. Maybe I'll figure out what the options are. Maybe I'll do some. So there's a difference in attitude about a challenge that comes up, and that's really important. The one of the things that I don't know if when you did the research about me before we decided to do this thing, I did a TED talk, a TEDx talk a few years ago, and this talk has over 2.2 million views already.
I gotta go check it out. What's it called?
Mind mapping.
Mind mapping.
You look up Hazel Wagner mind mapping. Okay. And this idea of mind mapping, and when you watch the talk, you hear that I didn't learn it till quite late in my education career. It would have been the greatest tool for me to have my whole life in terms of learning things. And so I have, in a sense, committed to this idea of sharing this with as many people as I can, because children and adults can think about a difficult topic so much more easily, clearly, look at what all the options are, think about where they might go with it, what they might do with it. When they understand about taking a blank piece of paper, starting in the center, what's the question you're asking or the topic you're trying to understand,
right?
And then building branches out. What are the options? What are the things I need to talk about? So let me give you an example. You said we're going to do ordinary visionary interview. And you're going to ask me, why might I be an ordinary visionary? And so I did. I don't think that showing you this works, does it? Oh, maybe it does.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
You can't see the individual things, but that doesn't matter.
But And I don't know if I can share my screen or not. But anyway, so here's what I did. I said, okay, Robert's asking me to think about this and be able to talk about it. So my first branch off the center is why ordinary? Why am I ordinary? What is ordinary, right? So I said, everyone in some way. I started very poor. I didn't even mention that, but I had no money in the beginning at all. I was very poor. I raised 3 children. I worked. I attended classes, so on. Then, why visionary? I said everyone has some visionary in them. You don't know if they tap into it a lot. I studied every night. After my kids went to bed, I got on the bike and rode my bike over to Northwestern University, which was, 5-6 miles away. Studied there in my library carrel, and then by 2:00, I was back home and in bed, and the next morning doing the same thing again.
Wow.
So why visionary? What kinds of things? Worked on early computers, all that stuff. The third branch is about critical thinking, because this is something that I teach about, and I go to companies who would like their employees to think more critically and creatively at the same time, can hire me to come in and do a presentation or a workshop with people to get them to understand it's not critical thinking is separate from creative thinking. It's that you need to put that together. That's what the whole thing is. So I have a branch here all about critical thinking and decision making and how you explain things to other people and how you understand things. And then the other branch is author. I have written 3 books. So I'm an author. I wrote a book called Business, Brains, and BS.
That's a great
BS
name.
stands for brainstorming, in case you're not too sure, or whatever you want to think it stands for. But that's the name of my book, Business, Brains, and BS. I wrote another book called Power Brainstorming. I wrote part of a book called Speaking for Success, not the whole book. Lots of famous people in that book.
Oh, yeah.
And then my own research got published, an analysis of the fraction concept. So I'm an author. Then I did this TEDx talk on mind mapping. And that's another branch off of the center. And then my last branch is clients. What are the kinds of clients that I can help with bringing this kind of thinking or thought processes to their employees and even to them, even to the leadership in an organization? So mind map, right? Start in the center, build out branches from the center. And that's how I thought about this interview that you wanted to do.
That's perfect. So, I've always been interested in education for some reason. I'm interested in a lot of things like you as well. How do people learn? Why is it so hard for some people to do something? A lot of that is related to mindset, but also it has to do with your emotional life. And, we're divided into 3 parts, right? In some ways, we've got the intellect, the head, we've got the heart, the emotions, we got the physical body. And you look at somebody like, what's his name? Stephen Hawking.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, no body, in a sense.
Right, just the brain.
Just the brain. And or people that are blind, their senses increase in other areas. They become very good listeners and sensors of things, and people that can't hear notice things better. And anyway, something you've thought of?
Yes, you can tell that that's all part of it. By the way, the author I was trying to remember is Carol Dweck. Dweek, I believe is how to spell her last name. And I am very grateful.
That wrote Mindset?
Mindset, right.
Carol Dweck?
Dweek, I think is the spelling of the last name.
Okay, great.
I recommend the book to everybody. I just think that we all want to understand what are we feeling challenged or even stopped from going forward versus things that we just dive right into and work at. And that really guides a person's life a lot. What do you run away from? What do you run into? That makes so much difference in one's life when you look back and say, what did you do in your life? What did you accomplish? Well, what did you run into? What were the things you wanted to be part of and did whatever you could to be part of that versus what are the things you might have run away from or avoided?
What are some of your insights about that? Because I think that's the most fascinating thing. It's like what makes someone successful? What makes somebody happy?
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are two sort of balanced things. And if you have those more in balance, you're more fulfilled. You have an idea, and a big block doesn't come up every time. You know, I have all these ideas, and I just let them flow.
Right.
I don't know
Well,
how you do it. It's so fascinating. You know, how do we bring our visions into action? Whereas some people, and I've met a lot of people that just stop themselves.
right. There's some people that don't want to do things that they perceive as going to be difficult. And
Yes.
instead
Or
of
they'll be
looking,
embarrassed or something.
yes,
All
yes.
kinds of things like that.
What stops us? Why do we care, first of all, so much about what someone else thinks about us or how we did it or whatever? That can stop people in their tracks. And that's a shame because we do not, we need to feel proud of what we do based on our own ideas about what's good, what's a worthwhile thing, what matters, and not what we think somebody else might think or review about something. And so I think that when people understand that they aren't controlled by other people's attitudes towards them, of an example of that, there are people who dress in ways that you might look at them and say, that's really strange. Why would somebody dress that way? And I just had this conversation with someone yesterday. She worked for somebody who was autistic and very smart and did a great job with their job. But the way she came dressed every day to work, this person who's telling me about it, it was so strange. And she didn't seem like she was washing her clothes and things like that. Well, she was focused on something else in her life, right? And she was doing a great job of what she was doing. And the clothing wasn't important. I relate it back to the person who started Apple and
Steve Jobs.
yes, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was known for wearing the same thing every day. That didn't mean he took and put the same thing on he had on the day before. He just decided that he would always wear these turtlenecks and always wear this color and he didn't have to he didn't have to put any time into thinking about what he was going to wear every day.
I'm all in on that. You notice what I'm wearing? Notice it's the same as that I wore in all the other videos.
Yes, yes.
This is just
material
what I wear. I wear blue jeans and a blue jean shirt.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't have to spend time. If it's not something, you're not meant to be the style person for people to be following necessarily. And so you don't waste part of your day figuring out, well, what should I wear today? And does this go with that? So I think it's kind of interesting that what people focus, what's important to them and what's not important to them. And it isn't, other people shouldn't make decisions about them. That's for them, and that's what they want to do. And you look fine in the denim.
Thank you. If you'd said I didn't, I'd be crushed.
Right.
Um,
So one of the things you said to me you were interested in, and I love to talk about, my 3 children. all entrepreneurs in their own right.
Yeah.
I think that just about anybody who's a parent gets to the point where what their children are doing and how their children are doing things that are good for the earth and for other people and so on makes a difference to the parent as well. And I hope that my children are doing things always that they feel good about and make a difference. So one runs a manufacturing company. One was the founder of a nonprofit organization to work with people who have neurological diseases that affect balance and walking. So
Wow.
they
That's
work
quite a
with,
specialty.
right, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, stroke, ALS. I think most people know those names and know what a challenge those diseases are. You
Yeah.
mentioned Stephen Hawking before.
Yeah.
That was one of his issues, right? ALS.
Yeah.
So people come into this. It was meant as a community. So they offer all kinds of services, physical therapy, group exercises, many times done in a chair instead of standing up,
Yeah.
chiropractor. They do infusions in that place if somebody needs infusions. She's a nurse, so she's got the degree, but she started this to be sure that there was a place for people to go, because these people many times live very solitary life at home because they can't get out very much. And so they even offer vans. They have 2 vans, pick people up and take them home, coming to this facility. It's called
Where's your business located?
her business is in Barrington, Illinois.
Okay.
It's called Neurobalance Center, and they have a website, neurobalancecenter.org. And she founded this. It's an amazing place, and people develop friendships and feel like they have camaraderie, and it's a social place as well as being a physical place where they can go and get some services. And
Sounds
it's
fantastic.
completely nonprofit.
Do you ever think, what is it that you did that somehow influenced your children? And just, when you're talking about it, I think, how was I influenced to be a self-employed person? My dad was in the Air Force, but after the Air Force, he became self-employed. So that rubbed off on me. My grandfather was self-employed, and my mother was into social service and volunteering and helping groups and stuff in her church. So I realized we take all that stuff on, and it's kind of a natural thing. We see them succeeding in that and whatever.
Okay. Well, I cannot finish without talking about my third one. It would be terrible.
Yes, I want to hear.
So my third child became a professional photographer, started her own company, started with a simple thing like a store where you could get your pictures developed in 1 hour. She just, she did that first, and then she became a professional photographer, and she ended up as president of PPA, Professional Photographers of America.
Wow.
President of it.
Wow. Well, with a mother like you, why not?
Think about how. And now she paints and draws. She's so artistic. She is so talented. And she has her own photography studio and a garden that they keep up every year to take pictures in the garden. I mean, she's very creative ideas about how to do wonderful portrait work. And some people actually fly in. She's north of Chicago, in a suburb north of Chicago. People actually fly in to have her be the one to do the portraits because she's so phenomenal. So,
wow. Great.
Yes, I am very proud of all three of my children.
Well, that's a blessing for sure. Oh my God. Yeah. It's
And
not
what did
easy being a parent. I didn't get to be
no.
a parent. Although
um,
when I married my current wife, she had two grown children.
that
And
makes it easier.
what's that?
That makes it easier to be a parent. They came ready to
Yeah.
be parented a little bit, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't really have to parent them. They were about to leave home, but by the time we married, and but one's a lawyer and one's a stock trader. But anyway, so I want to know a little bit more about what your work looks like and how your ordinary visionariness comes through. I mean, you do training, you do stuff in companies. Do you do individual coaching with people? What's sort of the range of things you do?
Well, I probably do all those things, but I kind of recoil at the word training. Training, I don't feel like I do training. I feel like I open up people's thinking. I feel educator, I can accept. Professor, yes, I've been a professor. I've taught at universities as well as what I do now. Um, Teach, I accept teach and teacher, that's fine. But I don't feel like I train. Train is something that you do when you're giving like a dog, right? They have to do this exactly when you say heel, they have to walk right next to you. So to me, training is something very different. And yes, there are times in business where people are working on a machine or doing a process where in a sense it's training because they have to do the process exactly the same way every time. So I can understand that there might be that word used once in a while, but I don't feel like what I do is training. If anything, I want people to take what they learn from me and expand it, have that vision to grow it, and how are they going to use it and how might they use it differently or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's about being able to do more with what they have learned rather than follow some dictum.
I totally get it. I think one of the mistakes I made is, I'm good at breaking things down into pieces. So it's like, do this, do this, do this. And that, it took me a lifetime to figure out that that's not, that's not as effective as I would have liked. I mean, people have learned a lot from me, but what you say is so powerful. I mean, really getting people to think and look at how they want to make things work and how, what's their vision, all of those kinds of things, which are much deeper than here's how to do something. But don't you notice that so many people just want to say, just tell me what to do,
Yes.
you know?
There,
And there's
I
some
don't know.
value in that, but
Well, there is. And sometimes that is the best way.
yeah,
And like I said, I like people to always think about options. What are our choices? What are the options? And sometimes something needs to be learned quickly and it's just a repetitive process. And therefore, at this point, showing somebody or telling somebody just what they need to do, which leads me to something else very important. We don't always talk about this, but we may have paid attention to it for ourselves. And that is that we have these different senses. The three that we use the most, right? Sight, um, sight and hearing in particular, and touch. Okay. But they aren't our only senses. I mean, that we also have smell and sometimes an odor affects us too. But let's work with the three senses that we use perhaps the most when we're learning something.
sure.
And some people learn best by seeing, reading something, looking at a picture, looking at a diagram, right? Some people learn best, they want to hear it. They put earphones on, they put earbuds in or whatever it is, and they listen to it and they remember it well from listening to it.
Right, right.
And some people need to go through the process. They need, okay, we need to put this thing together. I need to do it at least once before I get it. So I need to do the process. I need to touch, feel, do the process. So our learning comes primarily through those three senses. And notice I said primarily because we get it from other senses too, but seeing, hearing, and touch. But the thing is that for most people, one of those is stronger for them than the others.
Right, right.
For example, for me, I am what's called a kinesthetic learner, meaning touch and doing something is most important for me. If somebody wanted me to learn something new and they tried to show it to me, I would have to say, okay, let me try it now. Let me do it once and see if I've got it. And other people want to see it or hear it. So we need to realize that we do have all of these, and in helping someone learn something, in teaching something, in going through some sort of process to share some information with someone else, we need to be aware that their learning process can be different from our own. And sometimes you can ask them and they know, and sometimes you try all three and see what works. So some people who are saying, just tell me what to do, it may be because they just want to hear it and they remember it well from hearing it.
Right. Makes me think what my wife's learning process is. Anyway.
Ask her. She might know.
Yes. Well, she has particularly difficulty about some things that it's like, I won't learn that. You can't make me learn that. I don't want to learn that.
Well, that last thing you said was the most important thing. If somebody says they don't want to learn it, there is just no incentive for them to spend any effort on it. So that's what's going on.
Well, it's making me think of the things that I learned in my career because I'm self-taught. I didn't go to college. I did a lot of things. I won't get into my whole life. But for instance, at a certain point, I needed to be able to do a website. So I bought a book called How to Develop a Website in a Week with HTML. And I didn't know it was impossible. So in a week, I had a website. So it's the doing thing. It's not just reading for abstract purposes. It's like, okay, you do this thing. Okay, well, I got to get in there and figure out how to do it, and then do this, and then do this, and learn the basics of HTML in a week, which is I never became an expert at it. But it's interesting how some people, and I'm sure you're one of those, is you just take the bull by the horns and figure out a way to make it happen, right? So what's yours? Yours is kinesthetic, right?
Yes, my best learning is doing it. So even if I read the instructions, because that's the way they came, I only got instructions on a piece of paper, like when you buy something and you have to read the instructions.
Yes.
I want to follow and do what they're telling me to do until I'm sure I understand it.
Right. But,
and it's important to recognize that in other people, in our children, in anybody that we're trying to show or explain something to. But it comes back also to this idea that being able to offer all of those three to somebody when you're trying to help someone else learn something. And really, that's another reason why the word training is not a good one for me. What you're really doing is helping somebody else learn it. And you want to find what's best for them. What helps them be able to learn it? What makes a difference for them? And being able to understand that drawing things, seeing a diagram, hearing it too, and then doing it, being able to do all three of those is very often the most effective thing you can do to help somebody else learn something.
Makes sense. But there's another dimension of it is like you teach people, you work with people, you coach people, you help them learn certain things and understand certain distinctions. And nothing wrong with that. But I notice for myself, I want to learn myself. In fact, I'm very impatient with teachers. Really impatient. But how about that? No, you have to wait till the 27th lesson. No. So I have sort of a concept of what would be something. And so I teach myself, and these days we can teach ourselves like never before because it's all online. There's a million videos. Like I'm terrible at software. How to make this piece of software work. But thank God there's somebody that can say, click here, click here, click here, and then you learn it. So it seems to me that a lot of learning is shifting that way, don't you think? Because kids grow up with a little computer and an iPad by the time they're 3 years old, and they're learning that kind of thing.
I have a lot of concerns about that.
Yeah.
If they are learning that they do not take the first and second answers they find, but they get enough. So if they're looking up something, how to do a certain thing, that they don't stop at I found one, and then do that. I think it's really important that people understand that not everything on the internet, in fact, a small percentage of the internet has got it right. And there are lots of wrong ones, lots of mistakes, lots of things that don't work. And so it's really important that people apply that idea. Okay, I'm going to look this up, and I'll find at least three different kinds of answers from different places. One from the university, one from the government group, another from an average person who did this. In other words, that they want to understand that the first answer they get may not be the best answer, may not even be correct, because not everything on the internet is correct.
And there's a lot of, as they say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's so many workarounds and there's better ways to do stuff. And are you a systematic person? You try to get a system or process so you get something working, like, pow, pow, pow.
I'm sure I use that sometimes, but I wouldn't say that is my primary way of doing things. I really like to explore a number of options and then decide which one is best. But I'm an impatient person. Like you said, you're impatient. I'm an impatient person. So exploration cannot take too long, because I have to find something then that I can do and move forward on.
Right. We want quick payoff, so we get impatient. Like I'll be taking a picture of you and then removing the background. You know how simple that sounds and how hard it is? But
Zoom does it automatically when you're teaching, if you want it.
Yeah, there's that. But just an example of there's 15 steps in that. Everyone is important, and if you do it in the wrong order, it doesn't work. That kind of thing. Anyway.
Right, it can fall apart if you do it in the wrong order. Right.
So tell me, so are you full-time working now, part-time working? What does your life look like right now?
Depends what you call working, of course.
Earning money.
I consider myself part-time.
Okay.
Part-time retired. So part of my life is doing retirement things. And part of my life is still teaching courses online and coaching clients. I'm still willing to get on an airplane and go to somebody's facility and work with a group of people and coach them to apply critical and creative thinking together. That's the main thing, that people always think that they have to do one or the other. They're either a creative person or they're a critical thinker. And I say the most effective thing is that you figure out how you do that together, because You do better critical thinking when you're creative in coming up with options. You do better creative thinking when you're critical about which directions to go and what to use and all that sort of thing. And so working those things together is really important, and companies and organizations don't think about that very much at this point.
Do you do just-in-time training, which is you take a problem that they're having in their business and apply these ideas to that particular challenge?
I've never thought about it that way, but I wouldn't have a problem doing it. It would be fun for me to do that with someone.
I mean, I have a problem just with concepts. You know, as good as you were at math, I was bad at math. When in grade 10, I ripped up my math book into pieces. I was so frustrated. Seriously. I can't remember. I don't know if I got another book or something. It was just, I could anyway. So.
Well, we have to get our anger out some way,
Yeah. Get it out with math. So, yeah, I'm really interested in application and so how would we can maybe wrap up with this sort of, I've had so much fun interviewing you about your whole approach, and
thank you.
you're so happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
You really are. You're just a glowing representation of your ordinary visionariness. Same with your kids that turned out so great and loving to continue working with people. So is that your creative process, somehow incorporating creativity with, what was the other word?
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're comparing things and will this work and
right. And using vision, using diagrams, using mind maps, using a way to put on paper or on a screen something that will help people understand something better.
Right. I love creating models. Like, do you know what 4-quadrant models are?
No, I don't know the expression 4-quadrant models.
Yeah, well, you have on one axis it's one thing, and the other axis there's another, and then that breaks down to 4 different things. So you could have.
Okay. Yes.
You could have. Of course, I can't think of anything, but
a horizontal and a vertical axis and the 4 quadrants.
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
Very clear. Go ahead.
And sometimes that's so interesting because you see a thing in more dimensions that, for instance, you can take happiness and success. And then there's 4 quadrants, someone has less happiness and success, that's in the bottom. And one has more success, but less happiness. And the other one is more happiness, less success. And the top is both happiness, success. And you go, and that often opens up possibilities. Well, what does it mean to have happiness, success, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if this is a perfect example, but just, I created the market.
I wish for everybody to be in that quadrant. Why should they even be in the other quadrant? I want everybody in the happiness and success together.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different dimensions that intersect, and it's interesting, I've created a lot of those things, and were you around when I created Marketing Ball? Did you buy my manual? And
I don't remember the names of the things I purchased from you, but I've been following you for many years.
Right. But I created a model for marketing is like playing baseball. You go around the bases and step by step. And just that was a breakthrough for a lot of people. It was just one idea I figured out when I was working with a client one day. And I said, well, you have to get to second base. I went, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Have you come up with models like that with the kind of work that you do?
Yes. And which brings me back full circle. I coined that word in mathematics, the idea of a mental model. It had not been used before. And when I wrote my dissertation, when I wrote up all my research, I talked about children and adults having a mental model of the mathematics that they were trying to do or understand. And it was the first time those words had ever been connected to mathematics as far as I knew. I had coined the word related to mathematics. And those mental models, the whole idea of having a mental model, all the way to now when I talk about drawing a mind map or drawing a diagram of what you want to understand or explain to someone else. When somebody's trying to explain something to you, can they draw something to help you understand it better? Could they put something together to help you understand it better? So mental models started in mathematics and now applies everywhere, even with what you're talking about in doing marketing. It's a wonderful way to think about the circle.
Isn't it fulfilling to know that you really made a difference?
I'm hoping I have made a big difference in a lot of people. Other people have made big differences in my life.
Yeah,
So it works both ways.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Hazel, it has been a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all these ideas, and it's very inspiring for me, very inspiring.
Thank you.
Also inspiring to get into a little more reading.
Good. It's been wonderful talking to you over the years and now. So thank you for inviting me to think about what ordinary visionary means, what it might mean to me, and to have this wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Hazel.